Hello chess friends, I'm FIDE Master Valeri Lilov, and today I want to start new series of lectures on the attack in chess and some of the most important tips and principles when attacking. You should know that learning how to attack in chess is a whole art, a kind of new approach that every chess player should actually master. As you know, the most important thing in chess is to put a checkmate to the opponent's king. So in order to do that, we always try to keep our pieces organized and attack against his king. So I'll start now with a topic on how to attack against the uncastled king, and then proceed from there to explore all of the elements necessary to carry out a successful attack. So at first, before to begin with the example that I want to show you, I will briefly summarize some important concepts to be borne in mind when attacking. So the first is that basically the attacking chess will normally involve tactics at some point. So tactics by their nature usually involve checks or captures. So the most important things to watch for are checks and captures. This is simply common sense, really. If a player on every move starts by analyzing all the checks and captures that are available to him, he will be more aware of any tactics that the position offers. Checks and captures have a forcing nature, so they tend to lead to variations that are forcing. So by the process of elimination, a player can decide whether a line is viable, or in many cases whether it wins the game or loses the game. So here is rule number 1. Always analyze checks and captures first. So that's very important, because basically the successful attacks do not start from thin air. They are successful for a reason. A successful attack works because of certain features in the position. For example, an exposed king. Open, say, h-file against the opponent's short-castled king. Maybe active pieces, etc. These are factors for which a player should always be searching. Most successful attacks occur from the build-up of a small positional advantages. There is no point in a lone white knight attacking a blind king that is guarded by most of its army. A rule of thumb is that 3 pieces are normally needed for a successful attack. So basically, when we have these 3 pieces attacking a poorly guarded king, eventually our attack has a very good perspective to triumph at the end. So that's the first rule. Always analyze checks and captures first. The rule number 2 for a successful attack is only to attack where there is a chance of succeed. So how to understand if we have better chances of success if we start attack, or maybe it's not the right time? So this can depend upon a number of factors. The most obvious being when a player has more or better placed pieces than his opponent. In other words, timing is crucial. So I think that there are a lot more rules to be followed, but now basically what is really important for every chess player to know for the attack is that the basic reason why attack can be successful is that when starting some attack, the most of the chess masters practically try to calculate the possible variations as deeply as possible. So that's actually rule number 3. So when we try to analyze the position as deeper as possible, we can eventually see a lot of variations and good lines for us and our opponent, and after that we can predict to some point if our attack will be good or not. So basically, I explained to you that every attack is most successful when it is connected against the opponent's king. So this is why beginners are always taught to castle as quickly as possible so their king can reach safety. you know, a king stranded in the middle of the board is a very easy target to attack, normally because it has little or no pawns to cover. So the game that I want to show you now is a very instructive case to see how one side has left its king in the middle, and eventually that is becoming very vulnerable. Often in such cases, the attack needs to be very aggressively pursued before the opponent has time to get his king to safety. And so this often involves sacrifices to open up the center and also the files against the opponent. In general, it is worth keeping the initiative even at the cost of material than really to leave the opponent to castle and simply to solve most of the problems. So I'm going to start now with a game between two grandmasters, top grandmasters, the Russian top GM Pyotr Svidler against another Russian top GM, Evgeny Bareev. This game was played at the Super Tournament in Vaikansee in 2004, and basically in the following game we see a world-class player as black ignoring some basic rules and getting punished for his mistakes. So that's a very clear example. Now white played e4, and black started with e6, the so-called French defense. White played d4, and black continued with d5. So, of course, black's main idea here is to counterattack white's pawn on e4, and eventually this way to prevent the ease access for white's minor pieces in the center. So white still tries to support that pawn instead of exchanging or pushing that forward. So knight c3, and now black exchanges. D takes e4, knight takes e4. In result, it arose a kind of interesting position where white has more space because he controls 3 squares in the center. And in most of those positions where eventually white has more space in the center, black needs to provide very quick development for most of his pieces. Anyways, this variation has a reputation as being very solid for black because black has chances to develop quickly and really fight back against white's strong center. But as this game shows, it requires precise play from black to come near to equalizing. So after knight takes e4, black played knight to d7, preparing knight g to f6. And after knight to f3, black actually played that. The point is that now after white exchanges, black will take his queenside knight on the comfortable square at f6, where it will actually support h7, and it will help to black's king. So white played bishop to d3, and by developing a piece, he supports the knight on e4. Now, in this position, black played a very interesting move, pawn to c5, that makes clear black's idea to strike out in the center, but this is slightly risky policy as the black king is still a couple of moves away from castling. So after c5, white decided that the most effective way to exploit black's delayed development in the king staring on the center is to develop his pieces quickly and eventually to carry on some direct threats. So castling, and black decided to exchange on e4. Knight takes e4 came, bishop takes e to e4, and then black played knight to f6, simply attacking on the bishop at e4. So now we see that if white really defends that bishop, then after the exchange, it will happen a very important exchange of one of the most active pieces of white, the light square bishop. So after this exchange, I don't really think that he can employ a certain attack over the king side or maybe in the center. The thing is that, in fact, in most of the semi-open games that start after e4 and every move except e7 to e5, basically the light square bishop is one of the most important pieces of white in those openings. So after knight f6, basically white played the move bishop to g5 that didn't really take the bishop on a backward square, but it developed a new piece into the game. And here is a very important thing. When you consider to attack, always try to avoid to move your pieces back. So if you have a chance, bring your pieces on more advanced squares. That will actually give you a chance to develop initiative and also put threats against your opponent. So now instead of going back with the bishop, white is developing his dark square bishop and pinning black's knight on f6. So this way he's not really needed to take a piece on a backward position. Right, so we see here that white's whole army is now fully harmonized. Therefore, following the second rule mentioned that I gave is basically the most important for this position. So the second rule actually was that only we can attack when there is a chance of success, and in order to find if there is a chance of success, we need to think about the activity of our pieces. How good is our potential of pieces to attack? So white played bishop to g5, activating his bishop, and black decided to exchange, so he takes d4. In my opinion, that was the first step to the bad position that black received in just a couple of moves, because it opened up the position and black's king is still very unsafe. So after c takes d4 and knight takes d4, basically black made a new dubious move by going with his corner pawn, the king side rook pawn, and putting it on h6. So black should already be trying to castle as quickly as possible. So instead of going with something like h6, another very solid option would have been bishop to e7. So I think that white still keeps an edge, but it's a kind of minimal one. And after black castles, it will be a lot more difficult for black to, for white to employ certain attacking threats. However, black decided that the position in the current position there are no superior threats for white, so he played h6 instead. And how should white continue in order to make some threats against black? Well, on the first place, as I mentioned previously, it's a good idea if we try to bring new pieces forward, and with those pieces to try and create new threats against the opponent. So here came bishop takes f6, winning time by not getting the bishop back but simply exchanging that. And after queen takes f6, white played the simple queen to d3. So now white spots an opportunity to attack with the annoying threat of queen to b5 check. As you can see, black's light square bishop now on c8 has no good way to be developed on d7, since the b7 pawn is hanging. And in the same time, black has to take some other non-developing move like pawn a6 in order to prevent that annoying threat. So pawn a6 was played, and in this position white simply developed one of the most important pieces for every attack, and this is frequently the queen side rook. So white played rook a to d1, and now you can see the battery of the rook and the queen on that file, and just one move more will actually give white certain advantage on that file. Like if he just moves the knight on c6 or either b5, there will be some upcoming threats on the d file with the queen and rook. So after rook a to d1, black decided that it's a time to prepare the castle. So he played bishop to e7. And now how should white proceed? It seems that black is only one move away from the simple castle, and no matter that it seems that white's bishop on e4 is very strong and black will have some problems with the development of the queen side pieces, he keeps a kind of compensation because of the pair of bishops that he already has, and maybe he can try to employ his queen on defense through e5 to c7 to protect b7. So it seems that there should be no problems for black after he castles, but yet it's white's turn, and white exploits that in the best way possible. So after bishop to e7, he starts with the move knight to c6. So eventually we should know that always when our opponent has delayed his development of his pieces and his king is staring on the central files, we must act quickly. Otherwise, our opponent will have time to castle and eventually then bring the rest of his forces with no problems. So here it comes knight c6 very strong. As you can see now, black cannot take the knight because of bishop takes c6 and the rook will fail. So after knight is c6, black has another option, say to castle, but if he castles after knight takes e7, queen takes e7, this kind of exchange will be a very favorable for white, and after queen to d6, actually the whole variation gives white a very pleasant positional edge, but this is preferable, anyway, this is preferable to what happened in the game, because in the game black's king got onto a very dangerous attack. Here at least there is an endgame position, and no matter that black will experience after queen takes d6, rook takes d6 some problems with the b7 pawn, it's still in this position there are more chances than what happened in the game. So, you know, there is such kind of principle that always the defending side should try to exchange more pieces as it can, because otherwise basically the opponent can find a lot of threats. So for this reason, it was much better for black to enter that line, no matter that white is getting a clear positional advantage because of black's problem on the queen side with the b7 pawn and all the pieces. So after he castled, white continued with knight takes e7. Actually, if black castles, white can continue with knight takes e7. This didn't happen in the game, but if black was about to castle after knight takes e7, and as I mentioned, queen d6, white receives advantage. So instead, what he made was that after knight to c6, he played the move e5, with which he actually broke one more time the rule that in the opening we should never start to move any pawns before to have our king on a safe place. So only those pawns can be moved that are on the central E and D files in order to really provide some space for the other pieces like the minor pieces, bishops, knights, etc. So black played two totally useless moves like h6, a6, and now he's making a third one that totally breaks black's position. Pawn e5 was played, and basically from this moment black's position is very undesirable, but the king will be the biggest problem. So what to do when black played e5? It seems that next move black is gonna castle. So what really should white do? Now the knight is on a threat because black opened up the rank of the queen, and it is concretely threatening on c6. So what should white do? Well, quite simple. When we want to attack against uncastled king, we should always try to open up more files as we can. So white simply exchanged the bishop. Knight takes e7. Now after queen takes e7, he played f4 very strong. The idea is simple. By opening up the center, black's king will really feel very bad on the current position, and eventually black now had the last chance to castle shortly, because after the castle basically he's protecting his king. Anyways, black didn't want to go in this again, because after e takes d5, f takes e5, queen takes e5, and queen to d5, what happens is that black will experience a lot of problems. For instance, he cannot take on b2 because of the beautiful checkmate arising after queen takes f7 check, and after rook takes f7, the only possibility to take the queen, rook d8 check, rook to f8, and rook 1 to f8 with a check. Basically, considering that white's light square bishop controls h7, black's king is getting checkmated. So as you can see, white's queen on d5 will be tremendously active, and for this reason black will have to exchange it. But then after bishop takes d5, this bishop is really monstrous. It nails down on f7 and b7. So in order to develop the light square bishop, black will have to protect But as I mentioned, the same combination is possible even at this point. After bishop takes f7, rook takes d7, and rook d8 check, white will win the exchange, rook for a bishop. And in case black decides to refuse the sacrifice and play something like king to h8, white can simply bring his bishop to g6 or either play something like c4. In any way, he will have a certain advantage, a pawn more, and of course, very active bishop. So for this reason, basically, black didn't want to go on this line. He didn't like queen d5 coming ahead, so he decided to keep for smaller, at least for a bit smaller time, to the possibility to castle. And in this position, he made e takes f4. That is, of course, suicidal. So black had to castle no matter what was about to happen after queen d5. It was the smallest evil, as we can say. But now after e takes f4 already, when white has most of the files actually open, he was able to play bishop takes b7, and basically this capture finishes off the game. Now if black plays bishop takes b7, we see that there is the rook f to e1 coming, so black's king and queen are on the same file, and there is no chance to protect that queen, or maybe go with this away. Or maybe if black takes on f7 with the queen, then there is the simple queen d8 direct checkmate. For this reason, black decided to resign, considering also the option that after rook b8 there is bishop c6 check, and after king f8 queen d8. So in result of these exchanges, basically black loses the h8 rook. So after bishop takes b7, seeing that there are no chances left, most of the pieces are on backward positions, even undeveloped, he resigned. So basically we see that it is worth nothing how white only attacked in this game when he was fully coordinated, and also how he opened lines towards the black king with f4. I think that these two moments are very important. So always a successful attack could be employed if we have our pieces fully coordinated. There's also additional principle which says that basically we have to keep our pieces on that area or flank of the board where we want to attack. Now this wasn't the flank, but these were the central E and D files. So white kept these pieces ready to play on these central files. So he coordinated them, and finally he strike him with the move f4 and the idea to open up files against black's king. As a resume, what I can say is that basically it's very important to take care about our king and hide it as fast as we can. So if you notice that your opponent is keeping his king in the center and playing anything else, no matter if he's collecting material or he's simply caring about other not so important moves, then what your job is to coordinate some of your most important pieces like the rooks, the queen, and some knight and bishop, and try to open files against the opponent king by exchanging pawns. So this way, after you open files against that king, you can directly strike, and such combinations and thunders are becoming possible. Alright, so that is the first part of how to attack the opponent, and we will continue next time with other very instructive examples on how we can employ attack against the opponent's king, and certain tips and principles that could be used for it. This was FIDE Master Valeri Lilov. Thank you very much, and see you next time.